Hello, I'm Pastor Jeremy Combs, and we're on an expedition with the Exalted in this book of Ezra. Now, I keep making these goals and I'm not meeting them, but I do plan on meeting this goal today. We're going to finish up chapter 5, Lord willing, at the end of this, and we will now be officially halfway through the book. And by the way, remember, we haven't even met Ezra yet, and we got to go another chapter before we're going to meet Ezra. But we're setting up the establishment of the house of God. Last time we were together, remember, we talked about things had stalled, and then here came Haggai and Zechariah, and they proclaimed the word of God, and everybody got excited again, and Zerubbabel and Jeshua, and they started building back up the walls for the house of the temple. And we find that drew the attention of the local authorities, Tattenai and his scribe. And they came and they made inquiry by what authority you do this, whose activities are involved in this, and they're going to report to Darius to make sure, hey, they're covering their tracks. There's a little bit of debate here as to what they're doing. Some commentators see this as they're being nitpicky and they're actually trying to stop the work of God. Now, it's interesting, and I didn't cover a lot of this because we ran out of time, but verse 5, the eyes of God was upon them, and they couldn't cease. That is, the way the authority structure was set up. Remember, there's Zerubbabel. He's overseeing the Jewish population. There's Tattenai. He's overseeing the region. And then there is Darius. Well, Tattenai cannot tell Zerubbabel to do something unless he's doing it with the authority of Darius. And so Tattenai is going to check in because he's worried if they're doing something they shouldn't, I'm going to get the wrath of Darius. And so he comes in and says, hey, what are you guys doing? They're going to give a recorded response back by letter. And then he's going to go back and he's going to report it. But in the meanwhile, he does not have the authority to say, you all stop building the house of God. So in some ways, this is going to maybe light a little bit even more of a fire behind the Jews to say, we've really got to get this going, because it's not like they could send a fax or send a quick email. I know you know that. They had to write a letter, send it by courier. So you're probably talking months at best that before they could get an official response back from Darius. And so they responded by letter. And last time we ended, I said we really wanted to emphasize this more. And that is, sometimes that is the best way to respond. This year, we're doing a theme called Let the Redeemed of the Lord Say So. And you know what we're having people do? And I think it scares some, but others, after they've done it, have said, well, you know what? That really was really helpful. They're writing out their little testimony for 2 minutes. It's not, I don't want it to be robotic, but what I want people to be able to do is I want them to be able to think through every single word that they're saying. And I know even for me, I wish I had more time to do it. If I'm in a difficult passage, or sometimes when I'm preparing for a funeral, I will actually write out and rehearse how I'm starting a pivotal moment, because when you do that, you begin to think through every single word that you're saying, and you're thinking, no, that's not going to come. Maybe this would be a little bit better. This is what the children of Israel did. That they did this, the representatives, Zerubbabel and others, so that it could be clear, and so that it could be calm, and so that it could be correct. And plus, no doubt about it, they had copies, etc. So that now Tattenai is going to go, and he's not going to be able to misrepresent, or either intentionally or not, what they're saying. They're just going to hand a sealed letter to Darius, and it's going to be the very words of Zerubbabel and the nation of Israel. Very wise what it is that they do. So they're in the middle of this inquiry, and we then begin to get some letters. So that's why we've titled this episode Pen Pals. So let's get into those. You ever have a pen pal? That was a popular thing. I doubt they even do that anymore, but you'd get somebody from another school or someone from overseas, and you'd write them, and then you'd go back and forth. Well, this is what we're going to do here. Pen Pals. Okay, verse 6. The copy of the letter that Tattenai, governor of the side of the river, Shezer Boznai, remember he's the scribe, and his companions, the Arphachites, okay, that is a name for an Assyrian. So these are Assyrians that are writing this out, which were on this side of the river, sent unto Darius the king. So they're going to intercede to him. They sent a letter unto him wherein was written thus: unto Darius the king, all peace. Okay, that's pretty formal way to begin. Be it known unto the king. So we're bringing this to your attention, that we went into the province of Judea. So it appears that Tattenai didn't just have Judea. He may have had a couple other, what would be providences, little countries, regions that he was responsible for. And so he maybe is making a yearly run through, and he comes to Judea. He came to the house of the great God, which is builded with great stones and timber, and is laid in the walls, and the work goeth fast on, and prosperous in their hands. They point out two things that I would hope if people were writing an inquiry about you and how you're serving God, these two things would be said. One, he says, progress is being made. It says they're building with great stones and timber, and the work goeth fast. Okay? Can we describe your Christian life that way? Are you progressing? You know, the way to backslide is you just stand still. You ever been on a slick hill? Or even on a hill, momentum-wise, you just stop and you naturally start going backwards. That's why the Christian life is an uphill battle. We've got to always be progressing further. Our prayer life needs to be improving. Our scripture life needs to be improving. Our worship life, our soul winning, all that we do, we must have progress. And then they saw this, they saw prosperity. And they said this at the end of verse 8, and prosperous in their hands. They're saying, we could see things are happening here. And all we can chalk it up to is prosperity, or we would say God is blessing. Do you see the hand of God blessing your life today? I hope so. And I would hope, not out of being braggadocious or whatever, but other people could look and say, the hand of God certainly is upon them. Wow, look at that great marriage they have. Wow. And by the way, prosperity doesn't mean huge bank account, fancy car. It could just be, wow, what a great marriage. Wow, what a beautiful family. Boy, you know what? She's going through that trial, and boy, she has a peace and a joy that could only be of the Lord. By the way, prosperity, I have heard some say, is really the things that money cannot buy. And that's what people covet the most. They want joy. They want peace. They want hope. You can't buy those. They can only come from God. And so that is prosperity. Verse 9, then asked we those elders and said unto them, thus, who commanded you to build this house and to make up these walls? We asked their names also to certify thee, that we might write the names of the men that were chief of them. So that ends their letter. And so they're basically just stating their case, what they've seen. And then they said, really what we did was we came in and said, by what authority are you doing this? And who is actively involved in this? And their names are down. So we mentioned, boy, hopefully your name would be written down last time. But, you know, part of being written down as well is they may face persecution. They may face retribution for what it is that they're doing. But I tell you what, blessed are they that are persecuted for righteousness' sake, the Bible says, because that is what we are called to do. Well, then we get to see, as this finishes up, a beautiful script, a beautiful letter that is penned by Israel. You say, we didn't get to hear what they wrote. All we find is at the end of verse 5, they return answer by letter. Well, now we're going to get it starting in verse 10. We ask their names, verse 11, and thus they returned the answer saying, we are the servants of the God of heaven and earth. Pause, stop, major break here. By what authority? Well, human nature would incline us to say, Cyrus. You remember your predecessor, Darius? He and go, no. That's not where they started. They started at the ultimate authority. They said, we are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and build the house that was built this many years ago. He said, the God of heaven and earth is the God that gave us the authority, and we are only building his house. Your authority in life, God uses things like the president and your governor and your congressman and other things, maybe your pastor or your mom and dad, but the ultimate authority in your life is God. And really, we talked about the staircase or the ladders of accountability and authority. Remember Zerubbabel, Tatnai, Darius. Well, really, it's the same way with us. Here we are down here. We've usually got someone over us, the police, king, a governor, parents, a teacher, and then up here is God. And if we're not obeying this, we're not obeying this. Okay? If we're not obeying God, we're not obeying this. We wonder why we have such a rebellious nation. I think you're kind of seeing that situation that is playing forth. And so they say our authority is of God, and then it's also of you, King, and which a great king of Israel builded and set up. So they're going to give him a little history of Israel. And this is fascinating to me. They are historical, not hysterical. Okay? Give them just the facts, ma'am, would be what Joe Friday would say. Just the facts, ma'am. Okay? And, that's what we need to do. Sometimes we get into an argument or we get into defending ourselves and we have to paint it. We have to add a bunch of hoopla and hysteria to try to garner sympathy or what have you. As far as we read in this letter, they didn't do any of that. They went right to history. And they said, but after that our fathers had provoked the God of heaven unto wrath, he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, historical, the Chaldeans, who destroyed this house and carried the people away into Babylon. But in the first year of Cyrus, the king of Babylon, the same King Cyrus, made a decree to build this house of God. And the vessels also of gold and silver of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that was in Jerusalem and brought them into the temple of Babylon, those did Cyrus the king take out of the temple of Babylon, and they were delivered unto one whose name was Sheshbazzar, whom he had made governor. Pause, stop. They're going to go historical. They're going to really be just factual about the history of Israel, that they had done wrong. God had them carried away. And then we find that it is the king, Cyrus, that gave them the authority, that financed the expedition. And I wanted to pause because at the end of verse 14, he uses that name Sheshbazzar. And there's a lot of debate. Is Sheshbazzar one guy's Zerubbabel, the other? What a lot of people believe, and I think this is where I would lean the most, is that Sheshbazzar is Zerubbabel. Sheshbazzar would be a Persian name, and it means joy in affliction. Zerubbabel, of course, would be a Hebrew name, means stranger in Babylon. So Zerubbabel, when he's in his official capacity with the Jews, is saying, I'm a stranger in Babylon. I was there, didn't necessarily want to be there, but that's where I was. And then that Babylonian name, Sheshbazzar, has the idea of joy and affliction. That, hey, you guys are just so happy to be here, even though you were carried away, you're captives. You're going to remind everybody as leader that you are happy. So that is interesting there, that he even appeals with the name that they'd given him. So they're being very, very gracious and respectful. Verse 15, then said unto him, take these vessels, go and carry them into the house that is in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be builded in his place. Then came the same Sheshbazzar, and he laid the foundations of the house of God. That's why a lot of people believe that is Zerubbabel, because we're told earlier that it was Zerubbabel that was doing that, which is in Jerusalem. And since that time, even unto now, hath it been in building, and yet it is not finished. Now, therefore, if it seem good to thy king, not, hey, we demand our rights. No, if it seem good to the king, let there be search made in the king's treasure house, which is there at Babylon, whether it be so, that a decree was made of Cyrus the king to build this house of God at Jerusalem, and let the king send his pleasure to us concerning this matter. So it was historical, not hysterical, and it was very respectful. It wasn't retorting. Retort is kind of a sharp, or we could say even sarcastic response, but it's very well easy for them to say, hey, just read the book, man. Just go back and look at your own records, and you're going to find that one of your predecessors, you remember Cyrus, who he was? Yeah, he said, and we're no. They said, here are all the facts, and king, at your pleasure, or in your own good time, if you would go back and look at the records, I think it's going to validate this, that Cyrus did indeed give us the authority to do this. He did indeed give us of the treasury and back our possessions from there. And so you're going to find that everything that we're doing is exactly as we have been commanded to do. And in essence, they say then, we await your pleasure. We await to hear what you have to say concerning this matter. So you look through this, king, and you let us know what you want to do. Now, behind the scenes, they're going to keep building because they got the authority to do that. So let's just keep going as quickly as we can. But in the meanwhile, we're going to very graciously and respectfully send a reply to the king, and an appeal is pretty much what this is. And Lord willing, he's going to come back and he's going to say, you can continue on. Well, it's going to be more than Lord willing. We're going to see in chapter 6, our disappointments are God's appointments, that God is actually going to use this little audit or investigation to actually not only continue the work, but actually give it even more to get them across the line. And so next week when we come together, we will see the temple finally finished and get across the line. And then finally, maybe the end of next week, maybe into the week after, we're finally going to get to the author of the book, the scribe of the book, Ezra, and we're finally going to meet him. So whatever problems you're facing today, remember the pen is mightier than the sword. Write it out, think it through, and don't get hysterical. Be historical. Just state what has really happened. Be reverent, be respectful, and never be a retorter. And you'll see that God will honor you and God will work through that. Hey, God bless you. We'll see you next week.